A lot of rumors going around about the Vikings' plans to trade up, but maybe the deal's already done. Let me explain. It's the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. My hashtag everydayers. I appreciate y'all so much. Love you all so very much. I love hearing from you. I'm going to hear from you a lot because today is Twitter Tuesday and I'm answering your questions. So if you are new here, you can, of course, find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it's a podcast listening app like SiriusXM or Amazon Fire and Roku. You can just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app, or you can even just watch the show on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. So I'm answering your questions today. You can send me questions whenever you want. You can DM them to me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL or at LockedOnVikings. You can send an email to LockedOnVikingsPodcast@gmail.com. Fill out the Google form in the show notes. I'm going to be honest, the Google form is the one that's probably going to give you the best chance of me getting to your question because I only check it right before I record. So I'll definitely see it. And I definitely am not getting to everybody's questions. There's way too many, but I will get to as many as possible. And there's a lot of repeats and stuff. So hopefully I got to one that's similar to yours if I don't get to it exactly. First one I'm going to do comes from Tyler Spence, who asks, what's the likelihood of the team already having a deal in place with New England? Say its QBs A and B are taken, and then New England agrees to a trade with the Vikings so Minnesota can get QB C, but if A and C are taken and B is still there, New England would take him, and the Vikings move on to a planned trade at 4 with Arizona for the QBD. And then the Vikings get the fourth quarterback, So I think that this is reasonably likely. This is absolutely a thing. The Vikings actually did exactly this with Detroit a couple of years ago when they did the Jameson Williams-Lewis Cine trade. That was very much negotiated ahead of time. That was, we're going to do this if the board falls a certain way, and Detroit's only going to do it if Jameson Williams had fallen. Like if the Saints had taken Williams instead of Olave, the Lions might not have done it. So maybe, I don't know what their board was like, but that was the impetus there, I guess. It wasn't, these draft trades are honestly, I don't know how often they are until you get to like days 2 and 3 where it's just impossible to plan that far ahead because there's way too many dynamic things. I don't know how many of them in the first round are like improvisational or like things that happen on a whim. A lot of these are like pre-planned and pre-handshaked out. So I wouldn't be shocked at all to learn that the Vikings had some kind of handshake in place with New England, but it depends on which QB falls. If they like Drake May a lot, or if they like Jaden Daniels a lot, or if they like one but not the other, that could affect things. And that kind of brings me to like what the timeline would be, which we'll get to in a question in a second. But that does also open you up to a situation where the quarterbacks just like don't fall in a certain way and nobody trades up with you, right? And that's the, oh no, we kind of got shouldered out situation, which is a question from Scoling for Soup, which I love that, by the way, who asks, what would you like to see the Vikings do in the draft if we miss on the top 5 QB prospects? I'll even say top 4 for you there. I do not think Kwesi will let it come to that, but let's say Washington and New England hang up on us and the Giants trade up to 4 for McCarthy. Right, yeah. So this is the nightmare scenario, right? This is the thing nobody wants in Minnesota, and I don't think Kwesi's going to let that happen. I think everybody knows that if you come back to the Vikings and say someone outbid you, that he'll just like come in hot with something more, right? And I think it's pretty difficult to get around a guy that's that willing to trade up and has 2 first-round picks to work with, right? But yeah, let's say that happens, right? Or let's say that, all of this JJ McCarthy stuff was like a huge lie and they actually don't like him at all. And once the first 3 quarterbacks are out, then they like don't care anymore. So what I think I would like then is, what I don't want to do is like force a QB pick at 11, because that guy now gets 3-4 years of your franchise, a big chunk of Justin Jefferson's prime, right? To like not be very good, at least if it's like, Mike Penix, and I don't really believe in him. Of course, I'd give it a God's honest shot, but I wouldn't want that to be the way to go. I would say, all right, fine, get the best defender available, maybe get, another pass catcher or something like that. Build a really, really cool roster and sort of pivot your idea to what if we get like a Linsanity Brock Purdy run with Sam Darnold? Like that's what we're trying to put. Like, let's just see if we can't put like a weird December together that actually makes the Vikings do like an improbable run with this quarterback. And you might snicker at that, but hey, I mean, look, Baker Mayfield won a playoff game last year. Year 2, Jared Goff went to the Super Bowl with the Rams. Like the Jimmy Garoppolo years, like that level of quarterback play. If you can just get a little more out of Sam Darnold and you get a really, really good team around him, which, hey, now that you got 2 first-round picks and you're not trading them up for a quarterback, you get to do that. Then stranger things have certainly happened. So I guess you maybe pivot your attentions to that, but it wouldn't be ideal. I don't think anyone would prefer that. And but I would bet my life that the Vikings don't prefer that. Matt Cubbison asks, see the idea of Minnesota possibly offering 3-1s, but rarely see talk of Kwesi being even more aggressive and offering 4-1s to move up to the top 3. Seems unprecedented, but how realistic is an offer like that? Yeah, man, that's pretty realistic. I don't think that that's crazy at all. The 3-1s is because I think that was the Trey Lance trade. That's the thing. And the idea of your first rounder in 3 consecutive years and not having a first rounder for 3 consecutive years versus not having a first and second rounder for 2 consecutive years. Obviously, like there are trade charts for that, but like it feels like a little bit more of a palatable sell, but you still get to call, the Patriots or whatever and say 3 first-round picks, right? You still get to say, no, you're getting the Trey Lance trade and you're actually getting it better than the Trey Lance trade because it's not deferred as much. But yeah, if you're trying to get up to 2, maybe, because that's part of it now. Tom Pelissero on NFL Network said that at the owners' meetings, having a lot of conversations with executives and coaches and like the peoples at those meetings are like principal players. He's not talking to random scouts that like maybe just heard a whisper or two. Pelissero's talking to the guys and he says, a lot of people say that the Commanders are maybe in on JJ McCarthy or maybe even looking to get moved off the pick, which if you listen to some quotes from Dan Quinn or even Gerard Mayo, if you want to go to the New England route, also sort of reiterated like, hey, we're listening, we'll listen to offers, of course, with various levels of commitment to, well, we really want to take a quarterback, but maybe you'll offer us something crazy. And it feels a little bit like they're talking directly to the Vikings in that. But yeah, 4-1s. So that'd be 11 and 23. And then the next 2 years worth of first round picks. If that's what it takes, Kwesi would do it. If that's what it takes to move somebody off, like he would do that instead of settling for a quarterback that they're not in love with. He would do it. Will it take that? Or at that point, if you're demanding 4 first-round picks and that's what it takes for you to move off of it, maybe you're just not going to move off of it at all. That is, I think, the harder question to answer. Forever Cramps in Basketball Season asks, not so much of if the Vikings will trade up, but I'm starting to believe and want to know when you think the Vikings will trade up. Okay, 2 major options here that I think happen. So they just had the owners meeting, which, by the way, the next one is from School Club that says, why is it more likely that a trade happens? Because the owners meeting happened this week. So they just had the owners meeting. That means all the GMs, all the owners, and all of the head coaches were all in like the same hotel. They're all in the same place. So it's really easy to get those conversations. You're just in person. Kwesi can have lunch with Adam Peters and look him in the eye and say, let's talk about this. So it's a lot easier to hammer those things out. And you can even say like, hey, think about this and we'll talk about it at the owners meeting, right? You can schedule a conversation. That conversation gets had and let's say that it is successful. Then they all go back and say, okay, this is what we kind of handshake agreed on loosely. Let's get the paperwork. Let's make sure this works out. Let's make sure the cap works out. Let's make sure, that we like update all our plans and kind of get the legwork of getting a trade like that done. Give it a week for that to kind of materialize and for everybody to think about it and sleep on it and stuff. And then it will actually finalize soonish, I would say. For reference, the Trey Lance trade for 3 first round picks up to 3, 11-3, which is similar to, or 12-3, which is similar to what we're doing, happened the Friday after the owners meeting. So that would be why. And that would be one time. And I would say that if it doesn't happen in the next like week or so, then it's probably we got to wait till we're on the clock and we'll see if something happens. Because at that point, nothing will have changed. The last time GMs and owners and coaches all got together was the Combine, and the Vikings still hadn't made that Texans trade yet. So they got to show up to this and say, hey, things have changed. Let's reopen these conversations. If those conversations go somewhere else, then maybe it'll get done sooner rather than later. But if they're still not going anywhere, no major circumstances will change between now and the draft until someone's on the clock. And then that pressure can maybe get something else done, and then maybe something happens there. So those are your two options. There are some more questions that I want to get to. There are a lot more questions I want to get to. I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Got a lot more things to go over that aren't just about the inevitable quarterback trade up. So we will get to it soon on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, which is the best place to find last-minute tickets. You know, I'm not much of a planner. I'm not a Saturday at 7 o'clock, book everybody, put it on your calendar kind of guy. I'm going to wake up Saturday morning and go, hey, you want to go out to dinner? You want to go do something fun? And Gametime is really cool because it allows me to make some pretty cool plans at the last minute, maybe even into the middle of an event, right? If you want to go to a concert and the first opener is halfway over that you didn't even care about, you can still get a ticket to that event. It's really cool to see what you can get on Gametime. And the deals are great. They have zone deals where you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for big time savings. With the Gametime guarantee, you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, when you're done here, go flick on the 24/7 streaming channel at Locked On Minnesota Sports for all things talking Minnesota sports. Wolves about to hit the playoffs. Wild. I don't really know what's going on with them, but you can listen to Locked On Wild, Golden Gophers, all of the Locked On Minnesota sports roundtables like the football parties and stuff, and of course this show, all looping 24/7 over at Locked On Minnesota Sports. Moving on here with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, John says, continue the void years talk. Benefits of doing void years for 3 and 4 years when the player only plays 1 year with the team. So I explained this a little bit on Twitter with a really bad drawing. A lot of people roasted me for it, which was great. But here's the basic logic of this, right? Let's say you give a $30 million signing bonus to a player on a 3-year contract, right? That will not be a $30 million. You pay that $30 million in that year, right? In the year that he signed that, he gets that $30 million. But against the salary cap, you do not incur that entire fee as a cap burden. It gets spread out over the course of the 3 years. So it's 10 million, 10 million, 10 million in each of the next 3 years. So the first year is going to be the one with the smallest salary cap. As long as the NFL keeps making money, because the salary cap is tied directly to NFL revenue. And as long as that keeps going up, which I think is a pretty good bet, the salary cap will continue to go up. And it's going to go up pretty drastically with a new TV deal kicking in and gambling stuff kicking in. So it's going to go up like a lot. So this effect is really, really drastic. And that's why. Because those signing bonuses prorate evenly. They do not adjust to fit the changing cap environment. So instead of thinking of it as a dollar amount, think of it as a percentage of the cap, right? If that's 4% of the cap in the first year, the next year the cap has gone up, maybe it's only 3% of the cap. And then the year after that, maybe it's only 2% of the cap. I'm making up numbers, but bear with me. So if you paid that $30 million all at once, so you didn't do a signing bonus, you just made a guaranteed salary, right? Hey, you still get your money on the same schedule, but we want to front load this. We don't want that money to go out into other years. Or if it's a 1 year, say a 1 year, $30 million deal. Again, that'd be a crazy contract, but bear with me. A 1 year, $30 million deal, or a 1 year deal with a couple of void years on it. So if $10 million is 4% of the cap, then $30 million is 12% of the cap. If you're with me, right? So you'd have to pay 12% of your cap for that $30 million deal, right? That's a lot, but maybe you think that player's worth it, right? $30 million is quite a bit. Maybe that's a really good player. Or you can pay 4, then 3, then 2, which adds up to 9, right? So if you think of the next 3 years, you have 300% of salary cap. You can either spend 12 of that now, or you can spend 9 of that if you spread it. That's the goal, right? And the thing people always say is be like, yeah, okay, yeah, but once you get to that third year down, you've added void years. You're still paying off stuff from 2 years ago. How do you sign anybody in that year? And the answer is to take from 3 years down the road from there. And you just kind of keep doing that in perpetuity. And I think the worry is that you're going to do that. Somebody said like, oh, you'll have dozens of players with dead cap. I don't think I've ever seen dozens of players with dead cap. Even the Saints in the world that they are in, and they are the most extreme about this in the league. Maybe them or the Eagles. They have like 2 players with like significant dead cap, 2 to 4 in any given year. And then the rest of it is like draft picks that didn't make the team or whatever. It never gets that far out of hand because those void years only hit the year that player leaves, right? So you don't have you won't have a Kirk Cousins dead cap effect for the next 4 years, right? And essentially, if everybody in the league is working with a $255 million salary cap, which is what it is in 2024, but because we're using 2026 money, we get to sort of pseudo operate in a $325 million salary cap. It gives us an advantage. And as long as that cap keeps going up, we continue to press that advantage. That's the point. The point is to use future money because future money is cheaper. And I think our brains are really hardwired to hate the idea of like not paying debts right away because we live in a world that's still like 20 years coming off a credit card debt crisis. So I think, and like student loans and stuff, like having debt is really bad in our brains. But you got to remember there's no interest on this debt. You pay off the exact amount you paid off before and you have more money to do it later. So do it later when that's easier. Blake asks, are we doomed to a full season of the hip drop ban, or can the NFL walk back the rule change mid-season? So the NFL did a bunch of rule changes. That's part of the itinerary of the owners' meeting is for the owners to vote on things that the competition committee proposed. And for the competition committee, which is made up of like coaches and players and stuff, or I don't think it's players, I think it's just coaches and like executives and whoever will also vote on those proposals. One of the proposals was a ban on what has been dubbed the hip drop tackle. This was not really a name for anything before like middle of last year. I think Warren Sharp coined the name. And it's really nebulously defined as a tackle. If you're like chasing someone down from behind, this tends to happen, but it's a tackle where you wrap somebody up and then swing your legs past them in like a swivel is, I guess, the word that they've used to describe it, in a way where your legs kind of kick out the runner's legs and can like roll up their ankles and injure them. Mark Andrews got injured on a tackle like that, although that tackle was specified to not be one. The Mark Andrews tackle wouldn't be a penalty under this rule. They specified that, which I think is pretty funny. I think Tyreek Hill got injured on one of those this year. Kenyon Drake actually took to Twitter and said that like, yeah, this has been happening. This happened to me 2 years in a row. And my career was never the same. Delaney Walker's career was ended by that, according to, I think, Kyle Long. So, there are definitely like players who are in favor of this, but by and large, most players are not. The NFLPA is against it. It's a very controversial thing. To answer the question, no, you're stuck with it. However, they've specified that they're probably not going to flag this a lot. And it's more going to be like a post hoc fines thing, which is annoying, right? And for like labor reasons, that sucks. But as like a fan of football, that doesn't have any effect on the like team's chances to win. So it's probably okay for like most fans are probably going to prefer that. Obviously the players won't. But it won't be like 15 yards in this big controversy or anything. Like the nightmare of a big game gets swung by a hip drop tackle. I think they're going to try to stay away from that until the refs get a little bit of practice calling those, because it's a pretty nebulous penalty. And you want some good, like clear examples of what that is. Let me see if I can wrap up the questions that I pulled that I already thought I cut down enough. Next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. And look, it's March Madness. Y'all got brackets. Your brackets are broken. Your bracket sucks. I know it does. And it's okay because FanDuel has you covered. If you don't have either of the teams playing right now in your bracket anymore, why don't you just head on over to FanDuel and lay down a quick buck on them? Whether you're betting on a big upset or taking, the favorite with a huge spread, 3-point props, whatever it is, go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 back for any $5 bet, whatever it is. If your first $5 bet wins when you sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon, it can be like a super heavy favorite, which you're kind of running out of those as we get deeper into the tournament. But it can be a super heavy favorite, point spread, money line, whatever it is. If that wins, you get $200 back on a $5 bet. That's 40-1 odds. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and keep on grambling on college hoops till they cut down the net. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Gabe, who says, I keep watching Washington games, and Penix just seems to have this natural pop on the ball. Let's say we had the greatest QB coach of all time who magically gets him to plant those feet. Does that add like 4 or 5 yards on how far he can throw the ball? So what Gabe is talking about is one of the major problems that I had with Mike Penix, which I've actually seen a lot in a lot of other quarterbacks, and I think I just only learned to look at it when I was watching with Penix, and I mistook that for like a thing unique to him. But it's more extreme with him, and I do still think that he doesn't get a lot of torque on his passes because he jumps up a little bit. Like he actually jumps when he throws, like. And that means his weight isn't shifting from his back foot to his front foot the way that it should. When you throw, your whole weight should have shifted to your front foot by the time you follow through. Like that's part of it, is getting your weight to sort of like lurch behind the throw. And his foot sort of slides back on him, which tells me he's taking a little bit of weight off of it. And maybe it's a little bit more balanced than it should be. He should be, I mean, your entire, 200 pounds should be on that front foot. It shouldn't be able to slide, right? So let's say that a QB coach fixes that issue, gets him to shift his weight better. That would be great. My main concern with Penix is that a lot of the it's not the only problem with his throwing motion for one, and a lot of that weirdness is going to be really difficult to fix because of a possible lack of flexibility because of those injuries. And because he's a little bit older, it's obviously more difficult to expect him to just like work out all his problems. That's going to be why he sinks, not necessarily because he's like playing super worse than everybody else. I don't necessarily think he is, but because the root of his issues is way more concerning and the path to fixing them has more obstacles. So I'm still a little bit worried about that. Not to mention just the injury risk itself, but I'm actually worried that like I don't know if he has the flexibility to throw with the same torque, and he might just have to throw it weird all the time, and you're just going to have to deal with him spraying it. RG Besky asks, I know the draw of younger QBs over older QBs is that they will play longer in the league and will develop more as a player, whereas older QBs aren't going to develop much at all when they get into the NFL. How true is this? Okay. I was just talking about this. It's definitely harder to teach an old dog new tricks. It's not universal. This is a tendency. And I should probably go further out of my way to say that more often. A lot of, the principles of the draft, draft young players is good. Draft, good combine scores has a correlation to athleticism, draft wide receivers before you draft running backs. All of those principles are guidelines. They're rules of thumb. There are going to be exceptions to everything. So is it impossible for an older QB to, learn a new thing? Of course not. No. And yeah, I'm sure that there are examples out there somewhere. I'm not going to sit here and try to like brainstorm them, but I'm sure that there's examples of all of that stuff. It's just that it's a tendency. It's that much harder to expect it, and we're making probabilistic bets right now. So, the difference between an 80-20 outcome and a 60-40 outcome is significant enough to mention. You're just A. I hope that's not a Pretty Little Liars thing, because then I feel like I'm in danger. Says, with the 6-minute video of JJ McCarthy's pro day being released Monday morning, were you able to see anything in the footwork on his deep balls or touch throws that show improvement? Unfortunately, I did not see the improvement that I was looking for. So with his pro day, what I wanted to see was for his back leg to stop swinging out. This is my major theory with JJ McCarthy, why his deep ball is poor. When he throws deep, he closes his body off a little bit. He doesn't step far enough to the left, basically. And that closes his body off. And when he follows through, because his body is torqued and twisted still a little bit, he hasn't gotten the full untwist and therefore not the full power. And therefore there's stuff happening with just arm, which is hard to control. His leg can't just pop a little bit off the ground like it wants to. It has to go all the way out just to keep his balance. And he'll actually, where he is standing from where he throws to when he's in his follow through, actually steps a little bit to the right because he's not counterbalancing himself properly. That's my theory. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe that doesn't matter at all, right? I'm not a QB coach, but that's my working theory. And he's on the deep throws in the pro day. You still see that habit. So I'm still looking for that to be the thing that gets fixed so that I can know that his deep ball is going to be a little bit more consistent. Can it be fixed? Yeah, of course. But you also might not want to, because changing anything about a guy's throwing motion as soon as he gets into the NFL, that can ruin him entirely, right? There's actually risk to doing that, and maybe it's not worth it. Totally valid decision. We'll leave that up to whoever his QB coach is. A lot of people raved about how he had a good pro day. I don't know. It looked the same as his tape to me. I didn't really learn anything new off of it. Carlos Skoll says, I'm fully aligned with you on the it's never too costly to get your QB. However, I wonder what you would consider to be a hit on the QB. I mean, he's got to be your guy, right? He's got to be, I would say second contract is probably the barometer. Once you're and I'm not talking a Blake Bortles, pseudo restructure-y thingy. No, I'm talking a bona fide, this is our guy and we're going with him. I would say that's what it takes to hit on the pick. Jonathan asks, are star players, e.g. Justin Jefferson, consulted in any way when it comes to teams looking to draft quarterbacks in the draft? Great question. What a lovely time to ask, because I think right after you asked this, Kevin Seifert posted a piece about Kevin O'Connell said this on NFL Network and stuff too, and with reporters, actually said yeah, we've actually been he's been in the loop on everything. He's been talking to us, and he's kind of the guy we're building around, so we want to make sure the quarterback fits his skill set. So yes. Very much, it does happen. It's not universal. It doesn't happen with everybody, but Kevin O'Connell just told us that they are doing that with Justin Jefferson. James Rapine's burner account, James Rapine, host of Locked On Bengals, but his burner account, so it's not really him, asks, since Justin Jefferson declined to sign an extension last offseason and he hasn't done so yet, he's clearly unhappy with the Vikings organization and unhappy with the QB situation, as he has made it clear he was happy with Kirk. Obviously, he will be seeking a trade. What is your asking price to send him to Cincy? It's no. My asking price is no. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and your stadium. That's my asking price. It's not, if Locked On Bengals people, if you're listening to this, it's not happening. I'm sorry. They're building around him. They're trying to maneuver their team such that he is the core piece, and they've been working on this extension for a while pretty amicably. There's been no bad blood between the two sides at all. There's every single time a reporter has seriously tried to look into it, they've been yep, nope, everything actually kind of seems shipshape and they'll get it done. Denver asks, when we get contract details about structure, do we actually get that? Where do we get that? We get that information from? For me, my two primary people that are places where I get that information, usually Ben Gessling will just report the contract details. And I know that he is looking directly at the contract. So he's reporting firsthand information for the Star Tribune. And then overthecap.com also has some contract sources. Sometimes the reporting comes from them just via they update their website and you wait for someone to notice. But that is often sourced reporting or aggregated. So yeah, Over the Cap is either firsthand or secondhand, kind of an amalgamation. Robbie asks, what do you think about signing someone like Sam Darnold over going for someone like Joe Flacco or a Carson Wentz? Of those three, I think we got the player I want most. Joe Flacco had a really cool old man Hooper run last year, but I wouldn't expect that to happen again. And I don't know if Carson Wentz is an NFL player at this point in his career. Mike Lofgren asks, Vikes allegedly tried to trade up for Anthony Richardson by placing a massive haul on the table. Can you speculate on that haul? Okay. Yes, I can. I'll say it was probably going to be 6 picks in the top 75 over the course of 3 years. The actual details on if it was like 5 or 6 is a little fuzzy, but it was definitely 3 first-round picks. It was definitely going to be that, and it was definitely going to be significant day 2 capital as well. That's at least what I heard through the grapevine, and I'm giving it to you third hand, right? I'm no reporter. This is just like what was whispered at the time, some publicly, some privately, but that's my understanding, was that it would have made your head spin for sure. It would have been we would have been paying for that for a long time, but hey, we would have had Anthony Richardson thrown to Justin Jefferson. So that would have been pretty cool. Unfortunately, Arizona said, no, not much you can do about that. All right. Tomorrow, I don't know, maybe we'll have insane news to cover, or maybe we'll just like talk about a draft prospect or something. Whatever it is, I hope to see you there. And as always, Skull.